Hi YouTube, I'm finally back with the behind the scenes video for this particular animation. When I originally uploaded the time-lapse footage for this, I really didn't think anything of it. But since then, I have gotten a few requests from folks wanting to know more details about how I did this. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you a couple of examples of the tools and the resources I used, as well as going through some of the original files that I still have left over from this project. I just wanted to make a bit of a disclaimer here at the beginning of the video, just to let you know that the workflow that I'm going to show you while working on this animation is not exactly the same as the workflow that I'm currently using. The workflow is similar, but it's not exactly the same. And that's just to remind you that the resources and the tools that I'm using in this particular video are not the only means of achieving this kind of animation. Just know that in future tutorials, future videos that show up on this channel, you'll probably see a workflow similar but slightly different. So this is not set in stone. Anyway, during this particular video, we're going to start off in DAZ Studio, then we'll move into Marvelous Designer for the cloth simulation. Then there's going to be a little bit of ZBrush. We'll go back into DAZ Studio for some final animations, and then we'll bring everything together into Blender for a final render. So I hope you enjoy this video, and stay tuned until the end. I'll have some more announcements about what to expect in the future of this channel, more videos and tutorials that I'm working on, and let's get started. Okay, so I'm here in DAZ Studio, and I've started a new file. I just wanted to show you some of the resources and the add-ons that I used for this project, and once I go through a couple of those and explain what it is I did with them, then I'll go ahead and go through the actual files that I have left over from the program. So the main inspiration for this animation came from mocap footage that I purchased from BoneTech 3D. I ended up using the CGI Action Combat Volume 2 for the files that I used in this particular animation. For those of you who are not familiar with the software and you've never tried Anyblocks, let me show you something. I've got two figures loaded into my scene here. I have a Genesis 2 female and a Genesis 3 female. I also have down here in my Animate 2 tab, I've got the CGI Action Combat Volume 2 from BoneTech 3D. I have these mocap files, these Anyblocks, loaded in. Okay, so watch what happens when I hover over the high kick Anyblock when I have the Genesis 2 female selected. Seems to be working just fine. And this is actually one of the animations that I did use in the final. The second animation I ended up using was the Karate Kick 01. You can see there's a lot more bones here in the Genesis 3 arms and the legs than there are in the Genesis 2. I'll show you what happens when I do the exact same thing and hover over the Anyblocks down here with the Genesis 3 character selected. Yep, that's about what I would expect. Yep. So this is the add-on that I used to convert the Anyblock data to a Genesis 3 character. It's the Animation Conversion Genesis 2 to Genesis 3 add-on by Dragonstorm. So I'll show you an example. I'll run through an example pretty fast. Let's look at the kick block animation. I still have the Genesis 2 character selected, so you can see what she looks like doing that. I'm actually just going to click and drag this over. Boop. That way we can play through it. It's working pretty well. I'm going to bake to the studio keyframes. That way that's blocked in there. Copy over and adjust the animation. Okay, so it's completed the conversion process. We've got a little pop-up here. Thank you. Close that. And you will see there's a bit of a disconnect. It's not an exact science. You can see the characters are a little bit off from one another. But let's scrub through the timeline and see how they look. So this is the actual character that I ended up using. This is Sapphire, and I believe I gave her the Chance hair in black. Now you'll see a lot of, let me pull this up here. You're going to see this timeline down here. This animation timeline has a whole lot of stuff going on. There's also a Genesis 2 character hidden in here. Now the reason I have so many anti-blocks down here is basically because I wanted some more motion in the hands. Whatever software BoneTech 3D used, it didn't capture any hand movements. So the hands are very much static, very Karate Chop-esque. So I've added a few of my own anti-blocks, left fist, right fist, where the hand will close into a fist and then open back out. So you'll see as I scrub through this, she kind of transitions. Now she's got her left hand in a fist here. The right hand's still kind of in a karate chop, but that's getting ready to close into a fist as well. So now we've got the right fist and left fist here. Then as she comes up on this kick, the left fist ends and her left hand will now straighten back out again, hence the T-pose. Same thing's going to happen to the right hand. Her right hand has also opened out, so now both of her hands are in the straight T-pose, original pose they were in to begin with. So I applied all these anti-blocks to the Genesis 2 female, went through and made sure the animation was how I wanted it to be, and then went through the same conversion script to convert the animations from this character onto the Genesis 3 female character. Now I have not placed her feet on the floor, and that's just negligence on my part. I didn't realize her feet weren't really touching the floor until I was in the rendering stage, and by that time there was no way I was going to go back and reanimate everything. So I exported the animation out of DAZ Studio, both the character and the hair. I exported as a .mdd file. I also exported the character in this Y pose, including the hair, and then imported them here into Marvelous Designer. Right now I'm working with Clo 3D, but at the time I was working with an older version. So the clothing for this character was actually pretty easy to make. You can see over here on the 2D viewport, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of fabric, of simulated fabric. This is the bandeau top. It's just these 2 pieces of fabric, front and the back. I just have them tapered near the bottom just so they cinch onto the body a little bit better. These 2 pieces are using the waistband fabric, which is very much like an elastic, simulated elastic in Marvelous Designer. So it kind of acts like an elastic band, just goes across your chest. I also applied some pins to this to make sure it didn't slide off of the character during all that movement. So I've got 3 pins going along the chest here, 2 pins here, and 4 pins along the back here, just pinning directly into the character. And that's this tool, the Tack On Avatar tool. Okay, so this particular piece of fabric, it's hard to see. It starts along the top edge of the bodice here. It's stitched right along here. It's folded down over the front of the chest, front of the bandeau, wraps around the left side of the character's body, all the way around her back, back around the right side of her body, up across her chest, and over her left shoulder. It then drapes down the back of her left shoulder and hangs down to her calf. So that was really just a case of draping, pulling and tugging the fabric in its simulated form, and again, pinning it to the character. Got 1 pin here on the right side, right under her right armpit, another pin here on the left side. There are no pins going down the back, but there are 2 pins keeping it around her neck. So she's got 2 pins right there in her jugular. So the pants, like most of the pants that I make on these models, the waistband is again made of a waistband material to allow for a little more elasticity and movement. All right, this will make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. So it's this rectangular piece of fabric wrapped directly around her waist. Along the top here, you can see I've stitched it to the waistband just along the middle section here. This seam line in the middle is actually around the back of the character. Okay, so now it becomes a case of kind of creating legs, quote unquote, for these pants. So I start from this upper corner, go about halfway down, and then stitch it about here. So these lines, these are going directly across from one another. It's a little bit easier to see on the other side. Basically, this front piece of fabric will then get stitched to this back piece along here. All right, so now I've got a little bit of a bunchy inseam going on here. I've got these two pointed legs down the front. I chose these 3 vertical lines and I applied elastic to them. These are the settings that I have for those particular pieces of elastic. Strength of 21, ratio of 52. You could do a strength of 20, ratio of 50. It really doesn't matter. So let's run the simulation and see what happens. Legs get cinched up, and that gets cinched up around the back. There you go. Now, if you were to ask me how I modeled the armbands and whatnot here in ZBrush, I honestly cannot remember how I did it exactly. All I remember is it was really messy. It was a series of drawing in cylindrical shapes, then Dynameshing them, using the character as a Dynamesh subtraction layer, and then doing a Boolean subtraction modifier to get the armbands and the bracelets and the necklace, and then going in with, especially for the armbands, like radial symmetry tools to then get these ridges. I don't recommend doing this. I would recommend going into, if you're comfortable with hard edge modeling in ZBrush, by all means do it. If I were to do this again, I would probably model all of the accessories in Blender or Maya, so I have a little bit more control over how many polygons I've got. But this was really just an experiment just to see what I could do in ZBrush. The little additions here to the armbands were basically insert H cube, that was then flattened and then Dynameshed, and then insert sphere that went here, that again was flattened and then Dynameshed into the entire thing. The foot wraps were just extracted from the base mesh. I selected the polygons where I wanted the foot wrap to be, and then used the extract tool here to extract it to a specific thickness. In any case, once that was done, I then exported all the jewelry, just the jewelry and the foot wraps, as their own OBJ. Once I was done modeling the jewelry in ZBrush, I then exported it as an OBJ and then imported it back into DAZ Studio. That way I could map the movements of the jewelry to match that of the character. So I'm going to show you how I went about doing that. I've got Sapphire here in DAZ Studio. I'm going to import I'm going to use the transfer utility tool. Using the Genesis 3 female as our source, jewelry as our target, full body template. There we go. Worked pretty well. Now, if I were to go ahead and add an animation or a pose to my character. Now the jewelry follows the character. And it does the same thing. It will follow the character through an animation as well. Just an example to show you how you can go ahead and apply apply things like jewelry or bodysuits to your characters. Now the actual file is here. So I did the same thing, loaded the jewelry onto my character. I've got these same animations here. I tweaked this left and right fist animation so that I had more dexterity over that. As you can see, the character goes through her animation, jumps, and she pivots to the side and goes through the high kick. There you go. That's that full animation there. Okay, kind of got a wonky layout here in Blender. I was experimenting with some different layouts. I don't recommend doing that. But I've got this big long sheet here that's basically my backdrop. It's actually my floor. And because I didn't check to make sure that my character's feet were actually on the floor, I then had to create a false floor for her. So you'll see that this is actually where the 0 point is in Blender, but this is where the floor is. I had to move the floor up to meet her feet. You'll notice there's some strange things going on with the cloth here. It's looking light and dark in areas. This is because the normals for the vertices and some of the faces on this fabric are flipped. The normals are flipped in different directions. The reason for that is because when I exported the cloth simulation from Marvelous Designer, I exported it as, there are options to either export as thin or thick fabric, and I chose thick fabric because I wanted a thickness to it. Don't do that. Learn by my mistakes and don't do that, because you'll get finishes like this. Now it worked out. I went ahead and just went with it as it was because I thought it looked kind of cool. Because even rendered, you'll see that it's got a weird kind of light and dark play going on the fabric. It works fairly well, but it wasn't really the finish I wanted. It wasn't the final design that I wanted. I would recommend in future exporting your fabric simulation with the thin option and then applying a thickness to it in modeling software later on. But these are super simple materials. This was before I really knew what I was doing with creating materials in Blender. So the scarf here, the body wrap, is just this red diffuse with a bit of a slightly pink glossy with the roughness brought up. The waistband fabric, which goes for the under this bandeau and the waistband, just yellow diffuse. I didn't even add a specular map to that because it looked kind of shiny already because I had those normals all which ways. And then the pants, I had to search around for this. I applied a print to the pants and I just added a texture coordinate and a mapping node so that I could shrink the design down. Add an RGB curve just to darken it up a little bit. And then put a bit of a glossy on top of it. Doesn't have no normal maps or anything like that. These are super, super simple materials. Lights are set up pretty simply. Literally 2 lights. One kind of a warm tone, one a little bit cooler, a blue light. Just these 2 panels creating the light. I actually have 2 cameras in the scene. One is my animated camera, my other is my still camera. So I start with close-up on the face, and then keyframe the camera animation, camera movement, had it pull out so you had a better view of the camera, better view of the character, I'm sorry. She goes into her kick, camera follows her, she comes back down. And then comes in, wraps around here. Then my thumbnail camera had a second camera in here, so that when she lands here, then I can just render this out for my thumbnails and YouTube and on my website and whatnot. So that's really it, just using available resources and tools and pulling those all together to make this little animation a few months ago. So moving forward, I have gotten requests for specific videos, specific clothing items, and how to model them in Marvelous Designer. So those are going to show up first on the channel. But after that, I'm wanting to do a more in-depth, full-length, like step-by-step tutorial series on modeling clothes for three-dimensional characters. So not just clothing for DAS Studio characters, but also clothing for any customized characters, animated characters that you may be working on. So be on the lookout for things like that. If you have suggestions, anything you're curious about seeing that you think I might be able to help you out with, just leave any questions or comments below, and I will get to them as soon as I possibly can. Thanks for watching. Bye.